and to welcome you to the third and last of this series. But there can be life after this series. Next year, Hebrew year that is, or later on in the spring, I have some ideas of possible classes I could teach. But if there's something that interests you that you would like to hear me do or whatever, please inform the temple office and temple board, because certainly I would love to continue doing these kind of things, as you know. So tonight I'm going to give a brief recap of the first two evenings together, to bring us to where we are tonight. And tonight, the main focus is going to be first on the life after death ideas and beliefs in tradition, concepts in Judaism during the Middle Ages, and then reincarnation as expressed through Kabbalah or Jewish mysticism. And then finally, we're going to get to our times we're living in today. And if we have opportunity, of course, we can make sure we have the opportunity to share some of our own thoughts and feelings about all of this. The idea of this program is nothing more than, first of all, making sure that you understand that Judaism does have beliefs in life after death. And anyone who says to you it does not, they are incorrect completely. However, do Jews have beliefs in life after death? Certainly not only in modern times, but previously. Obviously, people believed and people didn't believe. That's up to each individual. But Jewish tradition, most definitely, and I've already described it first going to the biblical times, and certainly at our last session with the description of Talmudic times, and particularly looking at the Talmud and other rabbinic writings during the first and second centuries before the Common Era, and first and second and third centuries and fourth centuries of the Common Era. So, as always, we want to start off with a blessing to give recognition of God's presence as we study something, anything that is important to our lives. And I guess we would have to say that this subject is important, which is why you're all here tonight with me. So let us join together in the baracha, the blessing for study. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen. Blessed are you, ruler of the universe, who commands us to be engaged in words of Torah through study. Amen. And notice that the word was engaged. And tonight is definitely going to be very engaging. This is going to really call for you to put aside your rational mind and your way of viewing life as we kind of experience it. Some of us were taught, some of us believe, etc. But the idea of this program is not to convince you of anything at all, but just to let you know that Judaism does believe in these things. What you do with this, what sense it might make to you, is up to you, obviously, to all of us as individuals, number one. But number two is, at the end of all of this, in my summary kind of thing I'm going to do, is that I'm going to kind of put this in perspective, what this really does and can mean for our Jewish lives. So I'm going to bring up another screen. And that's this one here. Okay. I'm going to make this bigger. Okay. Woo! Okay. Well, okay. Now, for the discussion about Judaism and life after death question for the Middle Ages, I chose to look at one of the greatest rabbis of all time. I'm sure you're familiar with, all of us are familiar with him, if nothing else by name, because if nothing else, he had a hospital named after him in Brooklyn. And that, of course, is Maimonides, Rabbi Moshe ben son of Maimon, who lived in the 12th century in Spain. What I'm going to do is I'm going to treat here as almost like Torah. In other words, I'm going to read through this and comment and explain as I go along. Because in my preparation for my presentation tonight, I really had the question, how do I really get this across to all of you? And what can I share on a screen also, because that helps a lot, especially in a subject like this, beliefs of life after death. So I came across this, I forget what the website was. However, this is a quote, a section from the following book, The Wolf Shall Lie with the Lamb, by a Rabbi Shemuel Boteach, Oxford University. So you might want to write that down if you're interested in this subject in general. I haven't looked at the book, I've only seen this part of it. And he might talk about other philosophies as well, and not just Maimonides. So anyway, I want to let you know that this is a quote on the internet that was quoting his book. Okay, last time I did mention to you, or maybe the time before, when I began by saying that Judaism does definitely believe in resurrection of the dead. The expression, the words in Hebrew, techiyat, hametim, metim is the dead, mate is a dead person, and techiyat is resurrection. And those of you are familiar with this in this one sense, because we do have mechaye, even in our Reform prayer book, Mishkan Tefillah, or Gates of Prayer. We definitely didn't have that. For those of you who are old enough to go back to Union Prayer Book, they didn't have this. Okay, that was not there at all. However, Gates of Prayer, Mishkan certainly have Techiyat. However, Mishkan and Gates of Prayer changed it to Mechaye HaKol. But the traditional prayer is Mechaye HaMeitim, the resurrection of the dead. The 13th and final principle of Maimonides' fundamental articles of Jewish faith is the belief in the resurrection of the dead. And as I mentioned previously, in every single traditional Siddur, not conservative, but Orthodox, any one of them, if you were to look at them at the end of the Shacharit, the morning service, Maimonides' 13 principles of Jewish faith, fundamental, basic, and you'll see this is going to be explained even further, are there. Jewish writings stipulate that 40 years after the coming of the Messiah, there will be a resurrection of the dead, and all who are lying in dust will rise to new life. To recap the previous two classes, based upon Bible and Talmud, this is the timeline. We are born, our body ceases functioning, which we will call death, at least biological death. There is a continuation of a part of us that we will call soul. In Jewish tradition, later on in the Talmud, but certainly later on, extrapolated, explained in the Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism, there are 5 parts of the soul: Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, and Yechida. And so it is that the parts of the soul, in various ways, will, after the cessation of functioning of the body, go to another place, a spiritual place, obviously, because it is what? Disembodied. The body is left in the ground, and the soul, whether it's nefesh, ruach, and neshama, forget the other 2 parts, they're higher levels of spiritual life, go to olam haba, the world to come. In this place called olam haba, the world to come, souls are then placed in a situation in which they are judged by the sins or good deeds, mitzvot, masim tovim, that they performed during their lifetime with that body. And so therefore, good souls will go to Gan Eden, Garden of Eden, which is the Jewish way of saying heaven, or some will go to Gehenna, the lower worlds, we'll call it hell, and then many souls will go in between somewhere, which we'll simply use the English word, or I'll use the English word, purgatory, an in-between place to kind of figure all of this out. However, one thing to think about as we move along in all of this is the following question. How is it that a disembodied soul can do teshuvah, to repent of the misdeeds in order to make sure that it goes to heaven. I'm not going to say God ain't never time to say heaven. It's easier. Okay. How is it going to do that without a body? After all, what is the big problem for a soul? A soul without a body cannot do what? Cannot perform what? Mitzvot. A soul without a body cannot light Shabbat candles. A soul without a body cannot enjoy Purim or Passover or give tzedakah or any of the 613 mitzvot are impossible without a body. So the question then becomes is this Olam Haba, which is for an extended period of who knows, thousands of years, hundreds of years, whatever, where souls are located and needing to improve their position, because how does a disembodied soul get from hell to heaven if it doesn't have a body? Okay, let's get back to this. Perhaps due to the natural human disposition to reject such a radical concept. Yeah, what is this? Give me a break here. How are bodies going to come back to life? Maimonides goes to great length to emphasize its importance and realize Maimonides was not just a functioning rabbi in a congregation. He was also not only a philosopher, a legalist, a judge, he was also a physician. So he understood when he says the body will come back to life, what that can mean, because obviously in a grave, after burial and go through 20, 30, whatever years later, all you're going to find there are what? Bones. Quote, resurrection of the dead is one of the fundamental principles in the Torah of our master Moses. This is the 13th and last one of the Articles of Faith. Continuing, quote, when it's a quote, it's Maimonides. There is neither Jewish faith nor any attachment to the Jewish faith for an individual who does not believe this. Meaning, for Maimonides, now granted, it's the 12th century in Spain. Granted, he's Orthodox. There was no reform, or there was only Orthodox Jews at this time, or practicing Jews in that sense, in that way, is that for him to deny belief in the resurrection of the dead is to pull oneself out of the Jewish faith. And actually, as he stated, I think it comes across in a few moments, a few lines from here, is that you are therefore denying the existence of God, because it is God who enables this to happen. In his Mishnah Torah, which was his great legal work, Maimonides concludes that one who denies the concept of resurrection of the dead, or the one who denies the coming of the Mashiach, are among those who have forfeited their share in Olam Haba, the hereafter. In other words, the person who says there is no resurrection of the dead, then they ain't even going to get to Olam Haba. Their soul, to use this expression that I actually asked my Kabbalah teacher the other day, who's in Jerusalem, Eliyahu Shir, basically your soul becomes nullified. It just, poof, it's gone. It doesn't exist anymore. That's pretty bad, right? All right. After all, we lost the body, now we're going to lose our soul. Oy. Okay. Because Maimonides dealt summarily with the question of resurrection. In other words, obviously for him, it was such a basic, fundamental belief in Judaism. There were among his contemporaries who criticized him for the summary treatment of this important topic. He got a lot of flack from others in the community, rabbis, scholars about this, okay? In order to dispel all doubts, but remember, he was a big macha then, his stand on this important question, Maimonides wrote some 25 years later after the Mishnah Torah, his treatise on the resurrection of the dead, in which he reiterated this very belief in Techiyat Hametim. He based all of this upon a verse that we looked at our first section from the book of Daniel. I'm sure you all remember it, okay? Actually, two verses, Daniel chapter 12, verses 2 through 13, actually, but two specific verses from Daniel. In truth, Maimonides wrote, this resurrection principle, which entails the return of the soul to the body after death, was already in Daniel, quote, thus he, meaning God, says, and many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake. What could that mean? Except, but what? You're dead, you're sleeping in the dust, but you're going to awake sometime in the future. What is that? Is it just a spiritual awakening? Well, and the angel said to Daniel, can check this out, Daniel in the Bible, chapter 12, verses 2 to 13. But you go to the end of all flesh and rest. Okay. In other words, your body is going to, like all flesh, is going to disintegrate. It's going to go poof. But stand in your lot at the end of the days. In other words, you're going to stand up and be counted for in the end of the days. And this was assumed by Maimonides to indicate bodily resurrection of the body. Observing that he cannot do much more in this essay than reiterate that which he already stated in his commentary, the Mishnah, Maimonides writes, quote, and I will state that the resurrection of the dead, which is widely known and recognized among our people. Okay, obviously a lot of Jews believed in that, which is accepted by all groups among us. Okay, because they were different. They weren't, again, 11th century, no Reform, no Conservative, but there were variations of beliefs within the Jewish community, which is mentioned on numerous occasions in the Tefillot, the prayer book, Agadot, writings of the rabbis, and supplications, blah, blah, blah. All of this refers to return of the soul to the body after it had departed. Further on in this essay, Maimonides concludes, in conclusion, we have informed prophetically, whether on one or many occasions, and it has been mentioned countless times by the sages of Israel, the rabbis, both of early and recent times, and has become widely publicized in our nation, and there's universal consensus concerning this. Now imagine a great thinker, an extraordinary mind, as Maimonides would say, there is universal consensus amongst Jews that the human soul will return to the body. And this is the proper approach concerning resurrection of the dead. Wow. So the question then becomes, how is this possible? Now, Rabbi Boteach now deals with this. The difficult concept, this difficult concept, sure is, right? Okay, some of you, is it possible? Requires enormous elaboration and discussion, not to mention, okay. So Rabbi Boteach, in this book that I mentioned before, To Lie Down, goes on now to raise the questions and offer answers. Whether these are satisfying to any of us, it's up to any one of us, obviously, as individuals. Okay, he says that two specific questions should immediately be coming up in your minds. Probably 1,000 questions are coming up. First, what question? What makes the belief in the resurrection of the dead a cardinal article of Jewish faith? In other words, think about this for a moment. What is the purpose of our Jewish life? The performance of what? Of mitzvot. But why should we do mitzvot? Why did God give them to us through the Torah? Because mitzvot are the way that we are repairing the brokenness of our world that we experience in order to bring about the coming of the end of days, when basically this world will all return back to God again. And we have the free will to make that choice. And so therefore, how then does the resurrection of the dead fit into this? Now this continues. The entire Torah is true. Of course, this is written, Boteach is an Orthodox rabbi, but not all of the articles of the Torah are considered to be cardinal principles of Jewish belief. When something is enumerated among the cardinal articles of faith, the implication is that it forms a foundation, a pillar that supports the entire structure of Judaism. What then is so incredibly important about the belief in the resurrection of the dead that all of Judaism rests upon? As you'll see in a moment, it goes back to what I said at the very beginning of this, and that is, if there is the belief in a soul, and I gave all the arguments of why Judaism must believe that there is the soul that transcends the cessation of functioning of the body, then there must be a return of that body to that soul to a body, because it needs to work on the correction of its misdeeds during its lifetime. Second, the very concept of the resurrection of the dead seems odd. Why is it necessary for a soul that has frolicked, I love this expression he uses, in the Garden of Eden for thousands of years to suddenly be torn from that wonderful abode and re-enter a physical body and repeat living on earth? So the question what Rabbi Boteach is raising here is give the soul a break. The soul left the body dies. The soul is now assuming that in the Olam Haba, the world to come, is the soul of a good person and goes to heaven. Why should it have to be tortured to go back into a body again when the Messiah comes, which is an ideal time which you all pray for? Go back into a body. What does the soul need that body for? The question, and I think we talked about this last time a little bit, is when the Mashiach comes and there is resurrection of the dead, what form will that body take? I'll get to that in a minute. Why then is it necessary for souls to suddenly leave this exceptional place, heaven, and return to this world in a physical body? Practically speaking, it appears that resurrection of the dead is a part of the rewarded promise by God for the observance of the Torah and its commandments. It would appear that this reward subdivides into two categories. One, in the Garden of Eden, heaven, when the souls are separated from the bodies, and the other on earth, when the soul is once again enclosed in the body. The resurrection of the dead comes after the souls have already dwelled in the Garden of Eden. They must leave the Garden of Eden in order to be reclothed in a body. In other words, it's actually a reward for a soul to be brought back into a body, because why? What does a soul, what's the main function of our soul? It is to work in the performance of mitzvot, to correct the misdeeds and the dysfunction of our world. And we know it's dysfunctional, right? I won't get involved in the TV today stuff, okay, that's going on in our world here in this country just alone. But in our own lives, there's such dysfunction. Why do we need to perform mitzvot? What is the whole purpose of this? And we need a body for this. We must conclude then that the latter reward in the form of the resurrection of the dead is far greater than that of the Garden of Eden. If this were not the case, then the resurrection of the dead would be more like a punishment rather than a reward. But what kind of a reward is this? What could a soul possibly enjoy more on earth, trapped in a physical shell, more than godliness in the Garden of Eden? How, in truth, is the resurrection of the dead considered a reward at all? There are those who explain that the purpose of the resurrection of the dead is to provide reward. Now, this is what's so interesting. Not for the soul, but for the body. For just as the soul has its own special place where it is to be rewarded in the Garden of Eden, in a natural environment and habitat from which it was originally extracted, so too the body must return to its domain, earth, life, where it too can be rewarded with the pleasures in which it delights. The resurrection of the dead is necessary to reward the body. In other words, our bodies deserve a reward too. But the body in the grave ain't going to get no reward. It's kaput. So there needs to be a new body that is thereby formed in when the Messiah comes, joined back together with a soul in a new order of existence. The resurrection of the dead is one of those concepts that best illustrates the superiority, listen to this, of the physical body over the soul. Again, why? We all think, wow, a soul is really very special. It's so holy, it's a part of God. But guess what? Again, a soul cannot fulfill its function of mitzvot and tikkun, the reparation of the brokenness of existence, without a body. Although superficially the body seems not only subordinate, but almost humiliatingly perverse in comparison to the pure spirituality and godliness of the soul. That's basically a fancy way of saying what I just said in 2 seconds. The truth is that the body has far greater virtue than the soul because the body can perform mitzvot. Therefore, so that the supremacy of the body over the soul be revealed in the Messianic era, representing the culmination of the whole creative process, the soul will be forced to be re-enclothed in the body. The belief in the resurrection of the dead expresses the absolute truth that the expiration and corrosion of the body is but only a temporary phenomenon. The truth of the matter is that the body is a very sublime entity, in fact, an eternal one. Wow. God chose the body not for 70 or 80 years, but for all time. And although the body may die and disintegrate, in other words, that thing in the grave, this is only a provisional state. In the messianic epoch, the body will once again rise in the resurrection and will exist forever and ever. The belief in the resurrection of the dead thereby forms a basic foundation of the Jewish faith. And thanks to this belief, one knows that the physical body, to which one dedicates one entire effort in Torah and mitzvot, and for whose elevation one toils 80 or 90 years, God willing, is an eternal entity. One's struggle on behalf of the body will never be in vain. The body dies temporarily, only to reawaken to everlasting eternal life. As it says in Baba Kama, which is in the Talmud, or in the section called Sukkah, which is in the Talmud, any change that reverts back to its original condition is not considered a change at all. Thus, the ongoing battle to purify, refine, uplift the body, and all of material existence has an eternal result. There you all are again. Okay. So, wow, this is an extraordinary thought, even to have a thought about, right? But keep in mind, where does this idea, this concept come from? It comes from the basic fundamental belief in Judaism that the task of let's just talk about Jews. We could say every human being, okay? But let's talk about Jews. The goal, the task of every Jew set forth in what? Yes, Rick, you're going to get the old dusty one. We'll have to just dust it off. Okay. Rick sent a chat there. Okay, I don't normally see them. Now I'm distracted. Okay, let me get focused. Okay, but the fact is that the purpose of Torah life, and this is, let's face it, whether Reform, Conservative, Orthodox, Hasidic, or whatever, Judaism lays forth the concept that the purpose of the 613 mitzvot given to us through the Torahs, the sole purpose of all of that is for us to work at tikkun olam, the reparation of the brokenness of this world that we live in. That's what God wants us to do. That's why God created us, for that purpose. That is the extraordinary role that human beings play in the divine cosmos. And in order to enable that to happen again, our body ceases to function, death. We olam haba, this place where there's heaven, there's hell, there's in between, there's judgment and things that souls are sent here, they're sent there. There's somehow some process by which teshuvah can be done, but how can teshuvah be done without a body? And then the Mashiach will come at some future date, and then Mashiach comes, everything stops, and then there'll be the Techiyat HaMetim, all the bodies will come back to some form of bodily form life, and then there will be a new order. When I asked Rabbi Shir, what is that new order? He says, we'll all see. Okay. What will it be? Okay. Because it has to be now a new order of body based upon a body that now is what? In a different state of holiness. Because of the following. And I asked Rabbi Shir about this. And by the way, if you're interested, Rabbi Shir offers wonderful classes, Eliyahu Shir, Shear. He has a score of YouTube. You go on YouTube, he has lots of different lectures on YouTube, and very understandable. He's a young man and a real Kabbalist, a really incredible mind. Anyway, my thought, which I shared with him, and he said that I am correct. The question then becomes, okay, so this is now, we're leaving this subject. That's the Middle Ages resurrection of the dead. I'm not going to ask you if you understand this, but did you follow? Everyone followed, at least. I'm not saying understand. You can't understand this. You can follow it, the reasoning behind it. However, my question and what I thought about in preparation for today, which is why I love teaching, because those of you, many of you were teachers, some still are, is that it allows us to think about things we're going to be teaching. So I began to think, where does resurrection and now reincarnation hook in? Why did the Kabbalists, the Jewish mystics, as they're called, come up with the idea of reincarnation in Judaism, which, by the way, they probably borrowed certainly from Sufism. There's a real connection between Sufism and Hasidism and Jewish mysticism, without question. But why did we need then reincarnation? Where does it fit in? Because the question again becomes, how can a disembodied soul in Olam Haba, this place called the world to come, whether in heaven or hell or in between, how can it repair itself to move ahead in the process of spiritual growth in terms of this world that God wants us to establish and create? It can only happen by reincarnation, meaning before the Chiyat HaMetim, the resurrection of the dead, it has to be able to, given the opportunity to come back into this experience, this dimension, this world we live in, and be reincarnated in another bodily form in order to allow it to do mitzvot. Reincarnation is essential in this scheme and fits into Olam Haba. So, number one is, for those of you might say, well, how old is the idea? Well, first of all, the word for reincarnation in Hebrew is Gilgul, Gimelamid, okay, which actually means a circle. For those of you familiar with karma, the wheel, it's in Buddhism, it's in Hinduism, and all this, and Islam, the wheel, karma, okay, things keep on going around and around, incarnation after incarnation after incarnation. The earliest sources that we have of this go back to probably the 12th and 13th centuries of the Common Era. There are rabbis, I can mention names, Rabbi Abraham Abulafia and others. They can be found in a book such as there's one of the two earliest of the Kabbalistic books is called Sefer HaBahir, another one Sefer Yetzirah. They're attributed to the 1st and 2nd centuries of the Common Era, but most probably they weren't written until the 8th and 9th and 12th centuries. So Sefer HaBahir does mention Gilgul, reincarnation, and that would be the 12th century of the Common Era. So it is fairly late in this progression, but however, so it's way after the Talmud and rabbinic sources we talked about last time. However, it certainly is during the same time as Maimonides, right? Because he was the 12th century in Spain. And these guys were in Spain, and later on, as time moved on, moved up into Israel, into northern Israel in Sfat. So, reincarnation. I'm going to make this easy on myself. I found this. I love, God bless Google. Okay. So I Googled Judaism and reincarnation. And there's this website called BeliefNet, okay? It's not a rabbi website. Anyone can go to it. It has a lot of stuff on it. Oh, I thought this was fantastic. I came across the 6 things Jews believe about reincarnation. Pretty cool, right? Who needs me? Okay, but I have to find it, so I guess you needed me at least a little bit. Okay, your soul, my soul, your soul, our souls are made up of 5 different parts. We've talked about this. I'm not going to read through this whole thing. Next part. The question becomes is, guess what? You can't fix everything in one go. All right. Remember, we have what? 5 levels to our soul. The basic level 1, nefesh. We can't go to ruach, the next level up, to work on that one, because each one of these levels, 5 levels of the soul, has a different function. And therefore, each one of them calls for a different reparation, a fixing. All of them tied in with what? Mitzvot, and therefore life, okay, to fix this whole thing. So we can't go to ruach until we do nefesh. However, within each one of them is also all the five of them. So in nefesh, there's nefesh and nefesh, there's nefesh and ruach, nefesh and neshama, nefesh and chaya, nefesh and yechida. Then ruach, there's nefesh and there's ruach and there's nefesh and ruach and oh God, ruach and neshama and ruach. Okay, explains it better this way. In order to completely fix your whole soul, you have to fix, guess what, all five levels. And guess what? Each of these levels is also split into 5 levels, making therefore what? You don't have to be great in math. 25 spiritual stages you have to rectify to complete the job. You can't go to level 2 or 3 without going through 1 and 2. You can't go to 5 immediately. You say, oh boy, I'm really good at this. I'm going to jump to 5. Guess what? You got to go through all the levels. For those of you who play video games, or during pandemic times, you do all these games on your Kindle or your laptop or your tablet, you can't just go and win the prize. You got to go through all the levels. Well, guess what? We have to do the same thing with our spiritual lives. Am I talking too fast? I'm getting excited. Okay. And if you think that's starting to sound like really hard work, you're right. Yay. Everyone can see this, right? I hope you can read it. Which is why the second principle of Jewish reincarnation, notice, Jewish reincarnation, it doesn't say Buddhism, it doesn't say Hinduism, is that you can fix everything in one go. You need more than one go round. It's enough for most people to sort out one soul level a lifetime. And even doing that is pretty good going, spiritually speaking. Most people, and I'm assuming that most of us are most people, will have to come back a minimum of 25 times before they've sorted out their souls, completely sorted the souls. Okay, now it gets more complicated. As long as you see how happy this girl looks? Sorry. As long as you're making the effort, doing the work and moving in the right direction, even if you don't actually complete the job, God will give you up to 1,000 more lifetimes to finish what you started. In other words, it says in the Kabbalah and the sources, we are given up to 1,000 Gilgulim, reincarnations, to work at these levels. So if any of you're sitting around home one day and all of a sudden say to yourself, oh my God, I'm so tired. I did nothing today. Why am I so tired? It's because your soul is saying, I'm at level 634. I got 400 more of these, souls to go, reincarnations. I'm exhausted. It might be because remember, you have a body, but you goof in Hebrew, but you also have a neshama, nefesh, and a ruach, and a neshama. You have all these levels inside of you, and you have levels that want you to work at them in order to get to the higher levels, and you'll see why in a few moments what the whole purpose is. But if you're not fixing your soul levels, and you're even causing more spiritual blemishes and issues than when you started off, God gives you only 3 chances or lifetimes to get your act together before he splits your soul up into various components and starts recycling them. In a book which I've been studying with Rabbi Shir, which it was written in the 16th century by a Rabbi Chaim Vital from Sfat in Israel, northern Israel, called Shar HaGilgulim, the Gates of Reincarnation. It says very specifically, as I studied this week, the definitively wicked person is given 3 incarnations only. And then after that, the soul is basically the nefesh. They still have a ruach and neshama, but the nefesh is nullified. And therefore, they have to get help from another soul. But they themselves can no longer do it alone. But with each one of the 3, they also will have an opportunity for 1,000. If they can get off this and start to working on rectifying, on improving their soul. So, let's get a little more complicated. Because other things, I'm going to get off of this for a second and come back to it, because I know it's so exciting. Follow this thinking. Let us say, I'll make it personal. I'm having problems on nefesh level, on the first level. Now, the question is, you might ask now, how do you know what level you're on? After all, let's assume, I'm I don't know, I'm playing Pokemon. Remember Pokemon? I'm really going really far back. Okay. And or Mario Brothers. Okay. Remember Mario Brothers? Okay. So I'm on level 2 on Mario Brothers. I know it because somewhere on the screen it says you're on level 2. But how do I know what soul level I'm on? I asked Rabbi Shear, is the only person I can go by, and he said to me, you'll know. Okay, you'll have an idea of how far you're going spiritually. Because some of you have a sense, I'm looking at some of you, and some of you, most of you I've known for a very long time, some really long time. You know where you are at spiritually. You really know. You know your frustrations, you know your successes, you know how you're screwing up. And pardon the expression, but now I'm retarded, I could say that word. Okay. Whereas you also know, guess what? Your successes. You know where you are, more or less. You really don't know how far you are, but you know you're moving along somewhere. You might not be in the highest levels. You might not be a tzaddik. You might not be a righteous person, whatever. You might not be able to get off of this whole wheel enough of these thousands of times going around, because you don't have to have 1,000. Theoretically, you could do it the first time. However, you have to be a really incredible human being. And looking around, none of us in this group are, including myself. We got a lot of work to do. So the question then becomes, what happens? I'm stuck at nefesh, and I'm really stuck. And now I keep on going, and I'm not a Russia where I'm stuck in this three pattern, but I'm an average kind of a person, an average Jew, working at this. I'm a nefesh, maybe nefesh, and maybe nefesh, ruach and nefesh. Maybe I got into the next level. Well, a couple of things can happen, and I hope you're following me, right? Okay. Again, I don't ask you to understand this. It's possible that another soul can enter into your body. This is called in Hebrew, neshama kafula, a double soul. Meaning, some of you are into these kind of movies, you can become possessed by another soul in two ways. Number one is you need help. And therefore not that you cry, oh God, help me, I need another soul. Give me a soul. Okay. But rather, God knows you need another soul to help you. And so God will send the soul, because we can be possessed, we can have many different sparks or souls of other people with our souls, and vice versa. So that a soul of a person who has succeeded in correcting the mitzvot that I have difficulties correcting can enter into my body in a process called yibum, which means basically integration, and come into my body, soul, and help me out. Or it could also happen that the soul of a person who has died, and he is going or she is going to be reincarnated, can enter into my body or my soul, because something that I'm doing well in, they will join with me and allow them then to correct the deficit in their soul. I'll give an example. A rabbi I knew many, many decades ago at another, not even in New York State, another state. He had a lot of personal difficulties visiting people in hospitals. He was a rabbi, but he couldn't, and some of us have that problem. Going into hospitals is not our thing. He didn't, when congregants were sick, he didn't visit them. When his family was sick, he didn't visit them. He was just repulsed by hospitals. But the thing is that for his neshama, his soul, to rise up at a spiritual level, bikocholim is a mitzvah. Visiting and caring for the sick, praying for others when they're ill is a mitzvah, right? We're going to all understand that. And he could not fulfill that mitzvah, which mean he was stuck on a certain level, his soul level. So then a part of his soul will enter into my soul body, because thank God I have a facility with visiting the sick in hospitals. So he then joins with me, and he therefore is fulfilling that mitzvah part by my fulfilling that mitzvah part, helping him to go through his tikkun, so that when he is reincarnated again, he's now at a higher level. So we can be possessed in those at least two ways. I'll answer another question that's on your mind. Yes, we can be incarnated into animal forms. So make sure you're nice to your dog. Okay. All right. Or a cat or a fish or whatever. Okay. Now, I probably shouldn't talk in this way. Oh, let me stop that for a second before I get to remind me food. Okay. I'm going to go back to my belief net. To explain to you what I've just described to you in this language, because I think this belief net put it together beautifully. At this stage in history, there are no new or complete souls. What this means is is that there are no new souls. In other words, there is no one any longer, according to this belief, in the world who is the first time around, first incarnation, brand new soul, whatever, and therefore they are immediately going to have all 5 levels, a place before them, and they can work their way through it. All of us are retooled old souls. That's why you're tired, right? I'm looking at some of your faces. Yeah, okay, we're exhausted spiritually. We've been around a lot of times already. However, guess what? There is one type of person who is a new soul. If I wanted to do, if this is a classroom, it'd be easy to do it there. If you could imagine what kind of person is a Jew who has never had a Jewish soul before and now has a Jewish soul. A what? Convert. So in Kabbalah, converts have a great deal of spiritual power because they are a neshama chadasha, a new soul. They're starting out fresh. They never had a Jewish soul before. So therefore, they are very powerful because other souls can join with them to be refreshed, or they can join with other souls as well. They have a lot of movements because they're not tarnished, okay? It's a new beginning for them. I think that's pretty interesting. Okay, now going back to this. Every single one of us walking around, this was written obviously in 2015, we can change 2021, has a soul that's made up of different bits of different people from the past, exactly what I described to you, and the present, by the way. That's part of what makes modern life so confusing, intense, and heavy, because there is so much spiritual unfinished business going on, right? Okay, I love this example. This person does a great job. Say Mickey Cohn still needs to fix his soul level 1, Nefesh, and that Linda Abraham still needs to fix her soul level 2, Ruach, and that Eli Strauss still needs some work on his soul level 3, Neshama. Now God creates a new body called Susan Freeman and gives her a soul that's a combination of all these other people's unrectified soul parts. The poor woman, such as us, now has the job of tying up all the loose spiritual ends that kind of get ignored for all these thousands of years. So this now helps us to understand something about what I said before about Olam Haba. A soul, okay, a person, me, okay. I die and my soul goes to where? Olam Haba. Based upon my deeds in this world, it's going to either go to where? Some level of Gan Eden, heaven, or theoretically some level of Gehenna. But then after a certain period of time doesn't mean anything here, spiritual time, is that level, let's say I'm on now Nefesh in Ruach in Nefesh. I've gone one level up from Nefesh in Nefesh, Nefesh in Ruach. I mean Ruach in Nefesh. I then come back again to work at correcting the things that I didn't correct the first time around. And now after that body dies, it goes up to it goes to another level in heaven, not likely in hell anymore, Gehenna. It keeps on going up in where? The spiritual world. What is the goal? If this is a spiritual video game, where is the goal? To rise higher and higher on each incarnation in Gan Eden, the heavenly realms. Because ultimately what's going to happen is when the final resurrection occurs, Mashiach comes, Techiyat Hametim, you will have maybe going back to Rick's question. I don't know if it's going to be um, a what's the right word? A reworked old body that we had when we died, now in a new form, but it will be a body that will be now on such a high level of spirituality that you literally will be in the spiritual realms to be able to then enter that new order that is the belief when the Mashiach comes. What that will be, we'll find out when that happens. Okay. So this, as you can hear, is really a very, very powerful schema, because what reincarnation does is, if you following all of this, it takes the gap of Olam Haba and gives us a system to work it out. Now, I'm going to use myself as my example. And some of you, I'm sure, have had this feeling. Do you ever have the thought, the feeling, where that thought come from? Or some of you have gone through life, whatever your profession was, whatever your job was, and whatever, and all of a sudden, let's say you're at work, whatever that work is, and your supervisor comes over and says to you, "Can you do this for me?" Whatever that thing is. And for the life of you, you never thought you could do that kind of thing ever, ever, ever. But the supervisor gives it to you, and you actually not only do it, but you actually do it successfully. And have you ever said to yourself, "How did I do that? How is that possible?" Okay. Based upon all of this, can it not be that the soul of someone who was successful in that activity, whatever that is, has now entered into your body for whatever purpose, and it's enabling you to take that ability or that action and then be able to use it to contribute basically to the performance of mitzvot, of doing something to better your life, whatever that means. Again, speaking personally, and some of you know my life story, there is absolutely no reason, explanation in the world why I should have any understanding of what I've shared with you tonight, or any feeling about what I've shared with you tonight whatsoever. However, I do. My feeling is that I am the reincarnation of my grandmother's grandfather, Rabbi Zev Wolf Turbowitz. And some of you have seen the picture of him and whatever, the photograph I have him. I talked about him before in Temple. I do believe that, because there's no way to explain why I am the kind of person / rabbi, but person first, that I am. Now, as some of you know, I'm working on translating a 17th century text on the Kabbalah. I am not a scholar by any means. I'm terrible with languages. Judy says to me sometimes I can barely speak English properly, okay? I still get some idioms wrong. That's because Rabbi Turbowitz was a Lithuanian, and I think I'm translating from Lithuanian to English, and he's messing me up somehow, and something gets mixed up here. All right, Rabbi. Oh, no, don't worry, I'm not off the beam here. Okay. But the fact is, and I've discussed this with Rabbi Shear, and he said it's very possible. The fact that I have a facility with the translation of Rabbi Aharon Berechia's work, Ma'avah Yabok, from the 17th century, and moving along with this actually now in an extraordinary way, because I have that time to be able to do that now. Rabbi Shear has said that he believes that Rabbi Berechia, part of his neshama, is being cultivated through me in order to fulfill certain things in his neshama and mine. And so again, you can always ask the question with spiritual matters, is that true? Or are you just making yourself feel good about things? Well, ultimately in life, we come across these experiences and we say, how, what, and this begins to enter into our minds possibilities of answers. I use that word possibilities because in the spiritual world, in the spiritual dimension, everything is possible. Nothing is impossible. This, of course, is the realm where our hopes and dreams come from, right? as Herzl said about Israel, you dream it, it will happen, or something like that, whatever the exact quote. Okay, we all know this. And our accomplishments in our own lives. As well as, and again, I say this with a great sense of humility and in no way as a statement of fact, to be sure, because no, I can't know it. Many of you might remember is that my grandma Paula died a couple of decades ago at the age of 92. And my sister had her third child shortly before Grandma Paula died, and named the boy, her son, Paul, after Grandma Paula. Even though Grandma Paula was alive at that point, my sister did that, whatever. I know it's not our Ashkenazi custom, whatever. That's my sister for you. But anyway, God bless her. However, the fact is that Grandma Paula felt very good to know she was in her 80s, I think, at that point. No, sorry, 90s, right, close to actually her death. I think this is about a year before, is that she was happy to know that the next generation was perpetuating her name. And that's the nice part of the Sephardic tradition of naming people while you're still alive after you. Anyway, as some of you know, my sister's baby Paul died 15 months old, died in his sleep. And I thought about this because I studied Kabbalah much of my life and these ideas, reincarnation and all. And the fact is that Paul was named after Paula. In the scheme of reincarnation, is that Paula's neshama had to come back to perform, to do something, and hadn't finished whatever its main task was in that lifetime, and needed to come back for only 15 months to fulfill whatever its task was, in order to then go back into Olam Haba, to other words, and to come back into another reincarnation, another Gilgul later on. So I shared these personal things with you rather than asking you to share anything, because that wouldn't be appropriate, I'm assuming, although we'll open this up in a few moments for discussion or sharing. But the idea behind my sharing is that these are, when we take thoughts like these, ideas like these, Maimonides, resurrection of the dead, reincarnation, these thoughts that are definitely in Judaism, they open up possibilities of seeing things in our lives which could then become very, very special to us, or be even explained to us, at least in a way that might be acceptable to some of us, maybe not to all of us, and maybe to none of us, but maybe just to you, as they are with me. But putting all of this together, and by the way, I did promise you to speak about what does Judaism believe today? Who knows? Okay, there are no, N-O, capital N, capital O, there are no modern Jewish thinkers, except for Orthodox, dealing with life after death in Judaism in terms of a modern context. Okay, they just don't, okay. However, obviously this was a part of Judaism. It is still a part of Judaism. But you can see an Orthodox rabbi such as that author, Rabbi Shmuel Boteach, he asked these questions. I shared them with you before from the quotation from his book, right? The citation from his book. And the fact is, the prayer book, the traditional prayer book, has not changed. 3 times a day, every Jew who uses a traditional prayer book and conservative prayer book prays, Baruch Atah Adonai Mechaye HaMetim. Blessed are you, O God, who resurrects the dead, brings the dead back to life. So after tonight, you have somewhat of an idea of what that means. Again, if you believe in it, that's up to any of you or parts of this. But I hope what you'll take away is, number one, to understand what Judaism, in its fantastic, beautiful way of looking at life, has set up for us. What is the schema? The schema is God has created souls. God has created bodies. And God has brought together souls and bodies for the very specific function of the performance of mitzvot, because we are, as a Rabbi Henry Stolonimsky said, we are co-partners with God in the creation of this universe, and actually to do so by the repairing of the dysfunction of this universe and the fragmentation that is in our own individual lives, our lives with our families, with our friends, with our community, with the world itself. And therefore, that is our function as Jews, but I certainly would have no problem expanding it. That is the function of all human beings, right? And therefore, what this says is that, again, going back to the first class, that we have something very special that God has given to us that transcends the death of that body in the grave, the disintegration of that body, and that is a soul. And it allows us to know then, in a very specific way, as described tonight in the last class as well, that all of this comes together by this belief. In truth, as you can see, where Maimonides' 13th principle comes into play, if you do not accept any of this, what does Judaism then mean? Okay, and I know some of you might believe this, and I don't mean to, I'm not putting this down in any way, but for a Jewish person, as so many people have said to me, my own family, my whatever, people have said to me, when I die, that's it, kaput, is finished, that's it, that's it. That is such an un-Jewish idea, because it robs from you the ability to correct all of the mistakes and the crap and stuff that you've done in your life now, in an eternal circle of existences, of abilities to, guess what? We have more than one chance to get it right. And that is what is so beautiful, because it goes back to that beautiful teaching, the opening of Genesis, that God saw the human being, and what did he say? He created something that was tov ma'od, very good. And if something is so very, very good by the Creator itself, then guess what? We have to be given another chance to correct what we messed up, because that's the beauty of the human being, to be able to fall and to rise up again. And what Judaism is teaching by these lessons is, guess what? We can't do it in one lifetime. It ain't going to happen. And therefore, God has given the opportunity through these teachings to understand, guess what? You have more chances, but don't use that as an excuse to say, I didn't do it. So, I got another 11, I got another 900 to go. Don't worry, I ain't worried. I can really mess things up now. No, that's not the idea, obviously, at all. Because obviously, there seems to be somewhere along here a delete button. And we don't want to be deleted, where our soul is therefore nullified in nefesh, and therefore we don't have the opportunity to continue to do the best that we can every single go around. That is the beauty of life. But that is really, if you hear all of this, and this is what Maimonides meant, this is the beauty of our Jewish teachings and of Torah. The end. Thank you. Okay, everyone delete yourselves. No, don't delete yourself. We're gonna unmute yourselves.
I have a question.
Okay. And okay, so Carrie first had a hand up.
Okay.
He was the buzzer.
Thank you. It's two parts. So the first part is, how long after you die does your soul rise?
And before coming back again?
Yeah.
Okay. I know this is it's an answer of no answer. It depends.
Yeah.
It could happen immediately, or it could you could be on the Olam Haba for a long period of time. Remember, time does not mean anything in the spiritual world and of the infinite world of God. As it says in the book of Psalms, 1,000 years in your sight, O Lord, are as yesterday when it's past. So it doesn't matter. But I'll give you again a personal example. When I was visiting in Theresienstadt, I went, and those of you remember my bike ride a year and a half ago, I went to Auschwitz, Theresienstadt, and Treblinka.
Yes.
Obviously, Auschwitz and Treblinka were very, very moving. There's no question. Treblinka is an amazing place. Very moving, especially a memorial that's there. But when I left the car in the parking lot, I went into the front entrance of Theresienstadt, and I had this overwhelming feeling I was there before. Every room I walked into looked the same. And as I walked through my inner self, I began actually to hear screams. I smelled smoke. All of these things started coming back to me. And again, please understand, I don't place, well, we all should find a teacher that we put our faith in. When we ask a question, we get an answer. If anything is a correct answer, it's there. And I spoke to Rabbi Shir about this experience. And by the way, it's written in my book, for those of you who didn't buy my book yet. Okay, it's in chapter 5, I think, or something. But anyway, I asked Rabbi Shir about this, and he said it is very possible that a soul of a person who died in Teresianstadt has been reincarnated into you. And it could even have done when you were born in 1948. And of course, obviously the war ended in 45. Okay. And Rabbi Shir said he's had many people ask him the same thing, gone to concentration camps and walked away with that same feeling that I had. And he believes, because the question becomes, and we can ask this question, what happened to all the souls of the 6 million?
I just said,
What happened to them? They are in this process also of incarnation, of Gilgul, okay? And certainly what they went through, they deserve to be in a very high level. But guess what? There are very few people, souls, that are off the wheel, so to speak. Okay, so if that answers your question.
Okay,
So
and the second part very quickly is if a person is cremated, does that alter any of this?
Well, in
Even though-
Orthodox would definitely say yes.
Right. And us Jewish people?
Well, I can only say I've officiated many cremations. I wouldn't be cremated myself.
Right.
It does affect our bodily form. So theoretically, under this belief, it doesn't affect our reincarnation, but it could affect our Techiyat HaMeitim in the end result later on, maybe.
This was fascinating. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. And to answer Torof's question, I think it was Torof. Yes, a soul does have an awareness of where it is. Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Which I talked about this last class, is that we can contact the dead and the dead can contact us from Olam Haba. They do have a consciousness and they do have the ability to communicate with us. That's a belief in Judaism, which is why, of course, in terms of folk customs, why there are traditions of going to the cemetery and talking to your relatives. Or there's a tradition before surgery. Some people do this. I know that. Or you go before a wedding, and you talk to your relatives. I know someone whose spouse died, and they get involved with another person. They want to get remarried, and they go to the cemetery and say, "What do you think, Gold? Is it okay for me to marry Minnie over here? You're not going to be upset with me." Oy. Okay. I think Erwin has, and then Barbie. Erwin.
Yeah. And this question about the Mashiach, what is a good source to explain when the Mashiach will come?
Okay. Now, again, I ask your forgiveness. My answers sound like no answers at all. You'll know it.
No, that's it.
When the Mashiach, because if the concept of the Mashiach, the Messianic time, is when there will be literally a change in the order of existence, and what we know to be the way it is now will not be. Okay, is that you'll know it. There'll be no question. What is that in the Lone Ranger when he does his thing and he's going off and then say, "Who was that man?" And remember that, who was that masked man? Okay, when the Mashiach comes, no one's going to wonder, what was that? Was that him? Or her, or it, whatever.
But I meant the writings. What writings, talk about that?
The Mashiach?
Yeah. Other than they mentioned it. And
yeah, really, I would say, I don't know, I can't say offhand. I would have to say, and again, there's not an avoidance, is that just Google and say writings in Judaism about the Messiah, and it'll come up. But remember, they will all be traditional. They'll all be Orthodox. So you have to put that into the hopper when you're reading it. Barbie and then Laura.
Okay, I have a question. If my soul is trying to grow and having problems, and another soul joins with it and enters my body, who am I for that period of time? Am I me? Yes. Or am I a combination?
Well, what is it? Well, I'll turn it around and say, who are you? What is it? What is you? What is any of us? Do we know who we actually are? Of course,
so I can be
a
double.
lot of money on this question.
I can be double souled.
Yeah,
basically.
Exactly. But just the same way is that I understand that I might very well be not only leaving aside my obviously some positive. God bless you.
Thank you.
That's the problem of being unmuted. Okay. Not only am I a composite of my parents and other people and teachers in my life, but I'm also a mixture of Rabbi Turbowitz and Rabbi Berechia and whatever. So yeah, all of these people make up who we are. So yes, they are all you.
And does that other soul leave when I have accomplished what I
Yes.
couldn't do?
Yes. Or if, let us say, to use my example again, when let's say it's fulfilled the mitzvah that it was lacking, the tikkun
Right.
it needed was visiting the sick, and it worked, and for 30 years it came along with me, so to speak. It's Sloan Kettering, and it said, okay, thanks, Moss, I'm leaving now. I'm going back because I have to be reincarnated again. Yeah. So yes, but actually, Barbie, thank you for that, because now I'm going to go back to Erwin, because thankfully, I enjoy, if you go on YouTube to the and granted, a lot of this is Orthodox, so you have to put it into your hopper. I'm obviously able to do that because I think that I'm a very old soul, actually. That's called the Baal Shem Tov Library. There are a lot of wonderful presentations about all these kind of things. And there was, I was listening the other day, and this rabbi was asked a question that Erwin asked, and that is, what will I be like in the Messianic era? How will I know it? And his answer was very interesting. He says, when the Messiah comes, you will become your true self. All of the masks that we wear, all of the things we put on, all of the, and by the way, this is great for therapy, okay? All right. Your true self will be able to finally be free and come out when the Messiah comes. There won't
I
be
don't
any.
know if I want to see my true self.
There won't be any need to put on phoniness to impress anybody. All of us will be our true selves when Messiah comes, which is what true peace is all about, what therapy and what psychiatrists make a lot of money trying to help us to figure out who we really are. When the Messiah comes, you'll finally know. All of us will know at the same time.
You're gonna come back with the same body?
Who knows?
I
Well,
hope not.
Yeah. I think Laura had a question.
Yeah, I actually had a couple of questions and a couple of observations. One, I have Hasidic relatives, and they're Lubavitches, and every time they send anything to me, they always have a stamp on the package or on the letter or whatever that says, "We want Mashiach now."
Right.
And they feel the way to bring him about is to dance and sing and through joy, which was another observation in Israel. When they took us, we went to Yad Vashem, and then she took us to it was like a comedy place. She said, you need, after sadness, you need joy. You need to bring back that joy, because that's what we need in our lives. And I thought that was an interesting, and it was true. We just felt like everything got lifted after that very horrible place to see. The question I had, we also, in I guess it's more Ashkenazi tradition, you name after the dead. And I mean, my belief was always to try and pick a relative that I really adored, because that's what I felt, that I always was taught that means the soul of that person is going to enter your child. And what they are, their neshama will be your baby's soul. I don't know if that really is so, if that's really the belief. But of course, I picked for Robin and Alan, I picked people that I adored. And I was thrilled when David got a name. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's some traditions you're not supposed to choose the name of a person who lived a tortured life or different kinds of things. You know, there's all kinds of, you can call them Bubba Mices or yeah, you have to be careful. But yeah, that's the belief. Yeah, sure.
Can you hear me?
Steve, hi. Yeah, Steve.
Yes. Quick question. What difference is there between a Jewish soul and a non-Jewish soul?
Very good. Well, the non-Jewish soul is not obligated to perform 613 mitzvot. Okay. So number one is, obviously, within other systems of belief, they have their tools to correct the soul, whatever those are, faith or good works or whatever. Each religion has its own. But a Jewish
But I
soul
thought we
has
have
this-
one God. I thought we have one God.
We do, yeah.
That's confusing.
Yeah, but the
That's all.
idea would be
Thank
obviously,
you.
it's not that the soul is different necessarily, but the tools to rectify the soul and to help it along its
Okay.
journey is certainly different.
Okay.
Do all religions have the same complex of beliefs? Not necessarily. I mean, obviously, Christianity believes in resurrection of the dead. General Christianity does not accept the concept of reincarnation at all.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not even a part of it thinking. On the other hand, Buddhism is into reincarnation and not resurrection of the dead in a bodily form. So they're different, different beliefs. It's all what we're comfortable with.
I should go to Buddhism?
No, don't go to Buddhism. Stay with us, Roberta.
Then I won't get the same body.
I only seen one screen. I'll call you in a second, Laura. Does anyone else except Laura have any questions? Okay, Laura, your hand's up again. Go ahead.
Yeah, identical twins. Is that one soul split in two?
Oh,
Or is
good
it two
question.
separate
Oh,
souls?
Uh-huh.
Sorry, I really threw that one at you, but
my
Well,
great grandchildren.
obviously with David and Marty, right?
yeah,
Obviously they are two different souls because one passed away a long time before the other one did, right? Yeah, so obviously they are two different souls that are just working things out together that way. Yeah,
thank you.
yeah.
They were
Oh.
very different people too.
Yeah, exactly. Even so, they might be identical in the physical aspect, but obviously in terms of the inner person, and hopefully they would be different. Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Well, everyone, it's almost,
Thank you.
Stephanie. Hi.
Is it
Steph?
God that chooses the body or the vehicle that you are reincarnated into?
I think
Or
I think it's the
is it,
system.
like an angel or?
Well, I think, yeah, well, God is constantly sending out messages and messengers. So God is in control of the whole system. But basically, it's where I think there's God is within everything, and therefore God, yes, assigns people to do certain things or souls to go certain places. God is aware of the whole system. Yes. Yeah. I think that's the only
Not
way.
always him or her. It could be a messenger.
Well, yeah, sure. Or
Yeah.
like the story of Daniel with
Angels,
angels,
yeah.
definitely. Yeah. Exactly.
It would
Well-
do a repair.
What's that?
God will do a repair. Your soul could go into a repaired body.
Well, yeah, that too. Yep, and help that out. And so the ability, but the system of reincarnation really offers the opportunity for corrections, and that's the whole point of the system. You see, the ability to correct the things that need to be corrected in one lifetime, which most of us really can't do. If you think about where you were in the beginning of your life and where you are today in terms of your spiritual life, your moral life, you might have improved, you might not have. Where are you? Again, the system gives us this opportunity to continue to come around and work this out. But it's also part of, and what I've come to appreciate after actually doing the preparations and thinking for this class, this program, is that the two really must go together. Resurrection, reincarnation really go together in, I think, an extraordinary way. And I've come to appreciate even more so by preparing for all of you. Yeah.
One
Well,
more
everyone, yes, sure.
What about guardian angels?
You can have, sure, you have guardian angels, sure. And you have guardians, and you can also have spirits. The same animals, obviously. And Judaism does believe in that as well, because I said is that people can be incarnated into animals.
So how would you recognize who this guardian angel would be?
Well, I hate to put it this way, you will. When you say recognize it, you can't say, oh, that whatever animal there is my Uncle Arthur. Okay, I mean, you don't know that, I don't think. Although this dog might act like Uncle Arthur. Okay, or my Uncle Arthur, that is. Okay, but I think I mentioned this to someone. I actually wrote about this, not in my book, but someplace else. I was riding my bike coming down off of Nichols Road last year, I guess it was. And all of a sudden, this osprey came out of the tree and started flying alongside of me. It was absolutely unbelievable. And I spoke to someone who was into this kind of stuff, and she said that was definitely a guardian. That was a spirit in the form of the bird, because there's a real belief in spirits and birds and things like this. What this does is it really enables the entire universe to become alive for us, because it helps us to understand that nothing in this system of God's is created by accident. Where things are in our lives, where things are placed in our lives, when things fall down in our lives, when we fall down in our lives, everything is a part of this whole system. And it's a process of working out, again, our neshama's journey that, again, fortunately, needs a body in order to have this functioning. Barbara.
Right, yeah. What if someone, a person is, as many people are, they're struggling psychologically or emotionally or spiritually. I don't mean spiritually in a religious sense, just they're struggling within themselves. They have so many issues. Could it be that someone else's soul has been reincarnated into them, and it's really their struggle?
Right. Yes, exactly. That they now have to work out through that person.
Would you be able to physically see the person?
Who's incarnated in you?
No. My granddaughter called me one morning and she said to me, Gail. Gail.
Okay.
She said, someone visited me, whether it was her dream or what it was. And she said, who was the person in the family who baked apple pies with red hair? Now, this was the person she was named after. And I don't know what to believe from it.
Well, what'd you answer?
I said, I hope so. That was Grandma.
Okay, yeah. In the dream you said that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, certainly, and this is a whole nother subject. Judaism definitely believes that we can be contacted by dreams, because our soul, our nefesh, and the ruach leave our bodies when we're sleeping at night, which is why there is that prayer, the traditional prayer, when a person wakes up in the morning, Modani lefanecha melechai v'chayam. I give you thanks, O Lord, my God, shehechazarta bi nishmati b'chemla rabba amotecha, for you have returned my nefesh to me, my neshama, you have returned my soul to me. Your soul goes off into spiritual realms when you're sleeping, and that is, of course, a part of dreams, which is why dreams are so very, very powerful, most definitely. And you can be contacted through, your loved ones can contact us through dreams. Twice I dreamt about my father, and he was as real could be, and whatnot. And we talked a little bit, and then unfortunately, he left, and I woke up. That's the way it is. Definitely.
Why do you think when I see my father in a dream, why is he contacting me rather than my just dreaming about him?
Oh, well, you're dreaming about him, right?
Right. Yes.
Oh, is he?
Why is he contact?
Well,
why should I believe he's contacting me?
Well, that to some people that helps them. That really makes them feel very good to know that they're loved.
I understand that.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
why is he contacting you?
No.
Well,
is he really contacting me? Am I just dreaming it?
Well, you have a choice. If you
Yes,
if you believe you believe you're just dreaming, then unfortunately that robs you of the opportunity to say, something special is going on here. My father is in a place. I'm assuming, hope he looks well as one can look, and whatever he's contacting you, and he's basically saying to you, I'm with you. And maybe at some point in time, there might be something that he might even say to you that is worthwhile remembering, because it has something special. Yeah,
It-
and there's some
you're
people who
saying
really
it's a matter of belief.
definitely. But once you
Okay.
see it's possible, it opens up a whole realm of wonderful
Gotcha.
things that could be open to you then, and special things. Rather than simply saying it's I'm dreaming, it's, it's nothing, and putting it down, and that immediately closes the door on the possibilities. Ronnie.
I had a dream, some dreams. One was my grandmother contacted me to tell me she just died. I was pregnant with Eric at the time.
Wow.
She said, "Don't be upset. It's not good for the baby. Your father's going to call you now. I'm okay. Don't be upset." And then the phone rang, and it was my dad to tell me. And it was as real could be. And then years later, my sister-in-law's mother, I'm food shopping, which is something I never really did. And she's food shopping next to me wearing a wedding gown and said, I just died. God gives you as much as you can handle. Don't worry, just be there for my daughter. And then the phone rang and she told me she died.
Yeah.
And someone from school who I was close to just died and came to me and said, "Look, I need you to call so-and-so and tell them to apply for my job." I felt like I called the man and said, "I'm really not crazy, honest." But I had that. And the last time I've had anything was right after my dad died. And somebody kissed me. Now, was nobody in the house at the time but Brian and Robert. And they both said they did not come in my room and kiss me. And my cheek felt wet.
Mm. So,
Rabbi, I took
Conley. Roberta, hold on a second. So what does all this mean to you?
To me, they definitely reached out to me. I have no doubts about it. But, I haven't gotten anything from Robert. I've not gotten anything from Steve, and you wonder why some and not all.
You can't answer that question. No one knows. But also people say to me, how can I make it? How can I get them to talk to me? You can't.
Right.
It's just going to happen or not happen. Yeah, it's natural. It just
Rabbi,
happens.
do Jewish people believe in Job, the book of Job?
I don't understand what that means.
I in college studied about Job and all the things that went wrong in his life, but he never gave up believing.
Oh yeah.
I've never heard about it when I'm in temple. And I went once to the library to get out the book of Job, but I was in awe. It was this humongous book. It was books and books.
Yes, it's a very interesting book. Yeah. Do you believe? Well, it is a book that really happened. It's probably happened a lot in life. There are many people
talk about it in temple ever, correct? I mean, I've never heard a rabbi say, "Today we're going to talk about Job."
Well, there are rabbis who've given classes about it and things like that, because it talks about a very basic subject which all of us have thought about, and that is, why do bad things happen to good people?
Right.
That's what it deals with. Yeah.
But he just consistently went on. Nothing knocked him down.
No, well, that's true. But it's interesting not to discuss it now. I mean, it's a major discussion by itself, but also to consider his friends who came to give him advice really didn't give him advice at all. Because people who are suffering just want the presence of other people and don't necessarily expect answers.
So perhaps that's another talk that you can do.
Yeah, okay.
I wanted to tell you about Conley and our trip to Israel. I took Con to Israel with us on that tour. I don't know if you remember. And since they have a dual marriage, Catholic and Jewish, Con went back and decided to be a Jew. And he was bar mitzvahed in Israel because it was very important to him to become Jewish. Does that have anything to do with his soul or my soul or anybody's soul?
Well, no. Well, the fact that he had this feeling to become Jewish and given his situation could be the soul trying to work itself out through his life. As well as I had a woman who was in her 80s who had intermarried. She married a Catholic man, had a family and everything. But for whatever personal reason, she converted to Christianity when the marriage occurred when they were in their 20s. And now she's in her upper 80s. Her husband died, and she came to me and said to me, now that she's getting close on the time she's going to die, getting close to the end okay, is that she wants to reaffirm her Judaism because her Jewish soul is crying out to her. And she wanted to become Jewish again. So you never
It could
know
be
what,
Conley's soul,
yeah,
because he went back with the 21, the trip with Jews.
yeah, yeah, that's right.
I can't think of, and then he actually became bar mitzvah there.
Yeah. So you never know what's being, the point is this, of all of this, and one of the points is that you never know what's being worked out through our lives. And simply to look at these things and say, wow, this is special. Something special is going on. And just by acknowledging the special, you don't have to label it. You don't have to put it into a box to understand it. Simply say, you know something, it's just wonderful and special. And that's holy. I mean, it's like love. Love is an emotion. You know, Valentine's Day is coming up, right? Okay, love is an emotion. Sometimes you can't define it, but you know it's there. The same thing with God, the same thing with all these special things. And how sad it is for the person who says, you know something, these things don't exist at all. They're just products of my own mind, because then what's ended up happening is you cut off the possibilities of all these things and what they can mean for your life. Anyway, everyone has gotten later.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you,
everyone.
Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank
Thank you, very
you.
interesting.
Thank
Yep.
you, Rabbi.
Very welcome, and hope I'll see you again.
Thank you.
Say.
Okay.
Okay.